All right. Hi, everyone. Hopefully you'll be tuning in. Sorry, we're a couple of minutes late because of internet concerns and such, and unpreparedness for me. So today we'll be discussing Moon of the Crusted Snow by Wabgeshi Grace. So first off, what did you guys think of the book?
Go ahead.
I thought that it was really scary. Like, I think a lot of people read this and they're like, oh, it wasn't very, like, horror-y. But to me, it felt so realistic and like something that I've specifically experienced, like, in a much smaller scale this year multiple times. And so for me, like, this was horrifying to read. And I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, I really enjoyed reading it. I read it super quickly. I thought it was a great book. It was weird for me reading it because it's kind of really similar to the book that I wrote, to my book, To Part, in that it's also like about a moment of like infrastructure collapse, what happens to you in your community. The like main antagonist is also like a scary white man with guns. So I felt like Wabgishig and I had like a lot of similar fears that we wrote from like in these books, but it was really interesting seeing it play out in like a totally different community. Like my book was set in like an urban environment in Dallas in a hurricane shelter, as opposed, and it's like a trans found family as opposed to like an Anishinaabe community in like a rural setting. It definitely made me feel like, wow, my community is like way less prepared for infrastructure collapse. Like Evan and his family are doing pretty good. So yeah, I really loved it. And it's obviously like the kind of book that I wrote. Like it's something that I'm very interested in. And I thought it was really well done too. That like slow, creepy horror of it. Yeah, it was really effective.
Yeah, I agree. I also thought it was like very effective, but it was like too much for me. Sometimes I will like rate a book a very low rating because I just did not enjoy reading it, even though it was a good book, because I just cannot deal with when things are just like too scary and they make me feel like so many uncomfortable emotions. So it was definitely just really effective in that way. But I didn't like it. Like I didn't enjoy reading it at all. And at the end, I didn't have so many thoughts, even though I can like recognize that there's a lot to be discussed here. I didn't feel like, yes, I want to talk about this book like right now, you know? But I'm happy you guys really liked it and have some thoughts.
Yeah. I did have that feeling of like, oh man, I feel like there's a lot to talk about here. And like you, Sage, also, I mean, one of the questions that I sent the group was like, how is your own community like resilient in the face? Because like Sage and I both were in winter storm situations this year where we lost power, the grid did go down, and we were facing that. And in Houston, we faced that numerous times with hurricanes, and flooding, but we'd never faced it with cold before, and we were completely unprepared, and it was like such a wake-up call. So it really made me think about like how resilient is my own community if the grid goes down, and the answer is like not at all. 0% resilient. Did you guys think about that at all?
Yeah, I was thinking about that a lot as I was reading it too, because so we had like in September we had the wildfires and had to leave because they were like miles from our house, and that they had to cut the power, and that was just like obviously a climate disaster that was horrifying and required like a lot of community collaboration. And when that happened, like I'm like in like Trump town of Oregon, like rural Oregon is very conservative and has like such a militia mindset in these moments. So with the ice storm and with the fires, like the people around me created a militia because they thought that Antifa was coming to break into their houses if they left from the fires. So there were like all of these just like
that is so scary.
Conservative farmers just like blockading the roads so that people couldn't come by if they didn't live there. And so yeah, I think like I'm definitely surrounded by, what's his name? Justin?
Yeah, Justin.
Yeah, I'm surrounded by him. So that like his character was really scary to me because I mean, like next door neighbor, I hear them not just shooting guns, but like shooting explosives like on every nice day. Like it is extreme. So for me, I definitely I mean, I feel like these guys are like prepared in their own way, but it's not in like a collective community way that I would feel safe in any of these situations. So
yeah, I'm terrified of my neighbors. Like not my immediate neighbors, like because I live inside the loop, but parts about like what if there's a hurricane and then you're a trans person and you're in the mix with all of the suburban people, and like there's just so many angry white dads in Texas, and they've been like just murdering their families all year in the pandemic. Jeez. Like every couple days in the local news, there's like some dad shot up his family. Like that's been our entire year. And like, yeah, there's just like the simmering with rage, like ready to snap at any minute, white, rural and suburban, in our case, dads who just like have a lot of guns, and that's like part of their whole identity, and it's really super scary. Yeah, so the villain was like highly relatable in maybe a way that like it's not as much in Europe. Like it's more of our like day-to-day in the US, unfortunately, and I guess Canada.
Yeah, did you like relate to any of that, Will, or was it very distant for you?
Well, like the hostility I felt was very distant. Like just how people have guns all the time. I'm just like, where, from where, how, you know? But obviously it's very different. And I think here it would definitely be like a bigger support from the government if something were like this to happen, like because I live in the city, and in Sweden they even have like these programs like to prepare for if something were to happen in emergencies. Like they would go around with water, and like they have systems in place. So I don't even think like what we saw that happened in the city with all like the ravaging of supplies and everything, I don't even think that would happen here. I mean, hopefully, maybe I'm being a bit like idealistic, but at least the first couple of days, I think that it wouldn't be that extreme, but I don't think we're prepared for it. Like, I don't know if they have storages the way that this like village had. In that sense, I think living on the outside of the city would be like an advantage in most ways.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of my neighbors do have generators. We don't have a generator, but so like during the ice storm, like they were able to sustain power, but for us, we couldn't, like for a few days, we couldn't even leave like we were stuck here because there was like a live power line down across our driveway. So it was like a very isolating experience. But I think for us too, like I know for a fact that like the looting and the everything like that aspect, like what was going on in the town like a couple 100 miles from them would definitely happen here. Just looking at like how everyone here responded to the pandemic in itself is just like buying up everything at the grocery store. Is just like all of the gas was gone during the ice storm. Everyone had bought all of the fuel, and there was just nothing left already. And that was like people had power or lost power for maybe like 2 days in the city, and that happened. And we were out of power for 8 days. And still, like that's nothing compared to what was happening in this book. So
do you feel like the Anishinaabe community handled like the crisis and the supply situation well?
I think, yeah. I mean, compared to the urban community, right, that we saw a glimpse of, it made me jealous because when in our society we're so isolated and we don't have a community, we don't have a leader of our neighborhood, you know, we don't have resources that we share in common. And so it's just every person for themselves. As soon as the power goes out, you know, like we have an informal network of like friends where like when all the power went out in the city, like my brother and my friend Sajani came and like stayed with us because we still had power for like, and then we lost it. But you know, you share within your family or your like community of friends, but there's no like actual community of the people you live near being like, we will take care of each other. And I made me really jealous. I was like, I would feel a lot safer like living in this world if we had that. And I think that that's something that I wish that settler society would learn from Indigenous people. And it just makes so much more sense climate wise to have more local systems rather than everything having a global supply chain.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Climate resilience and less like climate change causing, I guess.
I think it was interesting how they chose to show the way that like at first the like leader of the tribe was very like trying to be very like organized and not get people worried, and how as like this white guy came into their community, how like that caused this like shift in the Indigenous like community's leader, you know, like how
he just kind of rolled over for Justin.
I think
and Cam and his brother, like his brother aligned himself with Justin, which that was really interesting to me.
Yeah.
Like why?
I thought the scene where he like goes into Cam's house and they're like having a party was so scary.
Mm-hmm.
It was really scary. And that girl was in his lap. Oh my God.
Mm-hmm. And that just made me feel like all of the people in the US who have been like having parties and social gatherings during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And like how they were supposed to be conserving energy and electricity, and yet like they had like music bumping, all the lights were on, and yeah, that just like really ignited this like sense of like I can't trust others in this situation that I have felt in these like last climate things that have happened here.
Yeah.
Do you guys feel like Sim, you had the great question, if that this was a cli-fi?
Oh yeah, because there actually wasn't. It's often included on lists of climate fiction, but there wasn't actually any specific mention of climate change being what causes this grid going down. I thought it was really interesting that he chose to not explain ever why it goes down. It made me kind of think about the inevitability of it someday going down. Like our way of life is sustainable, and we do know that like it can't last forever. I thought it was really interesting too that the book starts out with they've just finished a hydro plant, right? They've just finished this like massive infrastructure for like green technology. And is he saying that that's going to come too little too late, or that's not the direction that we should be moving in? Like we should, you know, I think that Wabijay probably thinks that like he clearly like wants to return to more indigenous, like traditional indigenous way of living, which is a climate resilient way of living.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. I thought all that was really interesting, but it still felt like a cli-fi novel, even though climate change wasn't actually mentioned.
Right, like we don't know how the society ended up like collapsing in some way, but if it's from climate change or other things, like this is the eventual result or the effect we see it. And if it is for climate change, then and the internet goes down, then we'll never know in a way, which is quite scary and interesting, and just how it is experienced by the town. So I think it was good, even though as a reader, you're just so curious about it. I found it effective.
Yeah. I thought it was also interesting. I don't remember when, but at some point it was mentioned that like they were forced to move to this place, right, by settler colonialism. And like this place is not where they were, where like it is ideal for them to sustain like off-grid life or like their indigenous ways of living, but they're like forced to be here. And I thought that in itself kind of felt like a commentary on just like I don't know, like the bigger picture of climate change and the instability of the infrastructure created by settler colonialism, but also like the way that natives and indigenous people have been forced into communities that aren't going to be sustainable, and that's like totally on purpose. Like so many indigenous communities are being poisoned by the water, like because of oil drilling, and they're I saw like a absolutely wild statistic. I forget what it is now, but it's like how many people in indigenous communities are dying of cancer just because of their exposure to chemicals from their water. And it's like these are all very intentional things. And I feel like them being in this space, their power grid going out and having no communication and having no one come to check on them also felt like a very intentional thing.
Yeah. I was like sort of amazed that they extended as much hospitality as they did to the white settlers that showed up. And presumably at the end, like Megan O'Connor, who spoilered, like who did the thing at the end, she is gonna go with them. I mean, I don't get the sense they're gonna like kick out all the white people, you know, even though like I feel like that'd be a very reasonable impulse. Like, and that was sort of one of the things, like one of their cultural values was this like value of hospitality and the value of like caring for the dead. And those were like two pieces of their humanity and dignity that they were not going to give up on, you know, even if it's expedient, even if it's like a matter of survival. That was kind of like a line in the sand. And I found that to be very like hopeful and I don't know, just powerful. But yeah, I was like, if I was putting myself in Evan's shoes, I'd be like, nope, none of you. If you're not part of the tribe, do not come in. Like, move along. So I was really surprised at how like gracious they were, given all the history and the ongoing, oppressions that Native Americans and First Nations are experiencing. White governments.
And even after, like, there were so many chances where they could have been like, okay, now you need to leave. And it's interesting how almost afraid they were of Justin because of his arsenal that he just brought. And I think like that also is just such a metaphor for, or just like a smaller scale of like the reality of colonialism.
And how like entitled he feels to everything. Like he just invites himself wherever, like, yeah. But it was very, very great and effective in that sense. Like, it was just perfectly done, like that scenario, I think. Okay, Jurassic Reads says, I think more than anything, their community wanted to just continue, be it with or without Power Internet, and with or without the extra community members. Like, all they knew was a forward momentum of community. I agree, yeah.
Yeah,
I think.
Go ahead.
I think that like checks out with, like this idea that all of these indigenous communities have been uprooted and displaced from where they are indigenous to, and yet like they are continuing, like despite the common belief that like all the natives have died off, like they're actually very alive and continuing. Yeah, that exact momentum of community.
Yeah, and I found it really beautiful, or a very insightful perspective when, was it Eileen that said that we'd survived many apocalypses?
Mm-hmm.
And how like the perspective of just because this affects everyone, including white and privileged people, it is like this huge, I mean, there could be more attention to climate change because it does affect everyone. But I feel like for the first time as a world community, we're being threatened.
Mm-hmm.
And it's never been given like the same attention to smaller communities and marginalized people when they've been threatened in the same sense.
Yeah.
So I like that.
I was curious about how you guys feel about like, there's like a tension between like indigenous climate resistance sometimes and like mainstream white like Extinction Rebellion like type climate activism, and how those visions are very different. Like this is not a solar punk, like we just need to cover everything in solar panels and then we can like keep having modern society. This book's kind of saying like the way to be climate resilient and the way to halt climate change is to go back to these more like traditional ways of being, which is like, there's a lot of tension there. And I'm curious what y'all think about that.
I mean, I agree that like the way forward is to go back in a way, like close to nature. But I don't think we should like disregard technology as a tool that can be used, but the way of living should definitely be closer to Earth and like indigenous communities.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, I mean, in like envisioning a perfect future is like a combination of what we have known and disregarded and what we know now. And I mean, I think like we talked about braiding sweetgrass last time, but like that book completely changed like so many just like ways that I go about my life. And I think that it just comes from like learning from indigenous people and like trusting and knowing that their way of living is so much more sustainable and has been. And but also like technology is advancing so quickly, and there are like amazing tools that have been created that we could use. And if we just had like the billionaires on board, it could be changed. So much could be changed so quickly just with technology. So like in my mind, it's like both things are very much needed.
I feel like reading a book like this, it just underscores for me how important it is for like as a white settler living in the US, like on this continent, like to just learn as much and listen as much as we can to indigenous communities, because they took care of this continent for over 10,000 years before we came along without screwing it up. Actually, there was a really cool like scientific paper I saw that came out recently, and I didn't read the whole thing, but I read like the abstract and like the clips from it on Twitter. But it was talking about how like now we're seeing evidence that humans have been shaping the ecology of the earth for much longer than we thought, for like I think like around like over like 10,000 years, right? And like the extent to which there were just like pristine wild places that were untouched by humans is not true. Like, I mean, on this continent, indigenous people were like absolutely like cultivating, like the forests were like orchards, like there was like very purposeful cultivation and living in conjunction with nature. And so much of that knowledge has been lost, but yeah, I definitely think like climate activists and climate people should just absolutely like learn as much as we can from that and like follow the lead of indigenous climate activists too. I'm not like get rid of all the technology or anything, but I think it's so important to like balance those forces.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think like the people who should be kind of like, I don't know, like in communication about how we use that technology should definitely not be like white, like colonial billionaires,
Elon Musk.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think like it's the same conclusion. Yeah, we just need to be listening to Indigenous people, and also like they should be the ones who are, like there's a way, I think, for technology and like Indigenous wisdom to work together
Mm-hmm.
in a way that like we can't know as white people.
I think the biggest part of like the Indigenous wisdom that we've lost is like the love for the earth and the gratitude and the reciprocity that's just like non-existent, most like societies. And yeah, so I agree with you, Sage. Like
that's the first scene of the book too.
Yeah.
Because he's like hunting the moose, but he's like giving, doing the ceremony to like give thanks for it. That's what bothers me about and there's also that whole like vegan, like, like strict, like the only way to save the earth is veganism. Like people sometimes are talking down to like Indigenous communities where like they use animal agriculture, but in a way that like benefits the earth, like does no harm and everything. Yeah, that was, I don't know. It was a really powerful way to like start off the book, I thought, with the scene of him hunting the moose with like so much respect and everything.
Mm-hmm. And then when Justin comes along and is just like shooting a bunch of animals at once.
Yeah. Well, did he do that though? Or was he eating the people?
Well, he ate the people. When he first got there and he was like, see, I need to like prove myself. So he went out shooting animals. But it was like he like shot more than one. And they were like, you don't need to do that. Yeah.
Do you guys think that Justin was like did he kill people too? Did he kill that girl?
I mean, I think
why was
so.
she in a ditch? That wasn't even brought up, but like I was like, he did something.
Yeah. Because it was the girl who was like sitting on his lap, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he was killing people.
I think so too. And then eating them.
To make sure that he would have enough.
Why am I laughing? Sorry. It's not funny.
Like, I don't know.
It was like believable in the book, but it is so wild to just like say it like that, like.
But like that's what you were thinking even before like we brought it up. You're like, he's gonna eat some people.
Yeah.
Yep. Got those cannibal vibes.
Yeah. I just saw on Twitter too that Wob posted this week that he finished the sequel to this book. And it's 100,000 words long, so it's going to be a much longer book. It's probably going to be twice as long as that one. Damn. So I'm curious what is going to happen. I really want to read the sequel because it's going to get more into like the actual transition to going back to an Indigenous lifestyle. I wonder if like they'll probably, all the white people didn't just disappear, right? So are they going to run into conflict with other communities that have responded to this crisis in a different way? I'm definitely going to read it. I'm really curious to see where it goes from here. He just finished drafting it. So like he posted on Twitter, like, I just finished my draft for the sequel to Moon. So hopefully he has like a book contract. Maybe he got a 2-book deal for this and it'll come out maybe in like probably not for like a year or two, but
I love like open endings. So I was like, okay, nice. Like I can really just think about like all the horrific possibilities of the end of this. Or I can, think positively about it and like the snow melts and the power grid turns back on or whatever. But yeah, it's interesting to like shift my thinking about the end of this into like the intro to another book.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
My mom, I think she's watching the live stream. She's read the book and she's in the kitchen laughing right now. I don't know for what. Someone says something funny.
Yeah, I don't know.
What else? What were the other questions we have? And does anyone in the audience listening have any questions?
I had one question I was curious about. If the book made you want to change like your lifestyle in a way, like did it make you, I don't know, want to stock up on cans, or I mean, I know Sage, you've been planting like a lot, which is very inspiring.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like yesterday, I like cleaned out all of our cupboards and did that fun kitchen chore, and I was like, there's so much space to just fill this up with non-perishable foods. And so like I have this plan of like every time I go to the grocery store of getting like 5 non-perishable foods to put in there. But I've always kind of had that from a lot of other things, and mostly it's like personal experience at this point. But also like I think that these stories are really impactful in illustrating that, and I didn't realize how impactful they were until like something like similar had happened to me, you know. I think like one thing though that I would love is a generator. I think that's such going to be like such an important thing in future events because we lose power so frequently, and I think losing power is going to be a part of almost every climate disaster. And if you like can stay where you are during that, then I feel like that aspect is really important. We do have like a little bit of a community vibe on this property because we're not the only ones who live here. And so like that's good, but it's very small. It's not like to the scale of this story. And so I do feel like from this story, I kind of got some just like this idea that like politics are always going to come up too. Like when I'm reading How to Do Nothing by Jenny Odell right now.
Me too.
Whoa, cool.
Yeah, I have it right here.
Nice. I'm listening to the audiobook. But she talks about how like all of the communes and like intentional communities that popped up in the 70s always like fell victim to politics and some kind of like hierarchy of power that where like these other ideas came through, whether it was like misogyny or some kind of like intrinsic violence that we've been taught through capitalism, even if you're trying to be away from it. And so that's also something that I think came up a little bit in this book, not to the extent as like a lot of the communes in the 70s, but just like how people almost started like mistrusting the leader or like not thinking that he was telling them all the information or that he was like withholding rations. And so I think that just like gave me this, I don't know, just like something that I think I would be cautious of in that situation is like how are social politics going to play a part in climate disaster.
Yeah, and if there's individual communities, there's always more risk of like people being manipulated rather than having connections.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because of ever since like Hurricane Ike probably, which was like 10 years ago now, like I've always kept, we always had go through hurricane season every summer. So they'd say like always keep a week's worth of perishables and water on hand. And then since Hurricane Harvey, I've been super serious about it, probably keeping like 2 to 3 weeks worth of food and water on hand at all times, because it's not just for us. Like I know that we're usually going to have to like take in my brother or take in like some friends who like aren't as well prepared, you know, like I want to be able to do that. So yeah, I was actually thinking too, like I got to now go through everything like left over from last year and like get rid of all the expired stuff and like replace some things. Cause we actually did eat through quite a bit of our like emergency supply, just between like the pandemic and last year's hurricane season and then the winter freeze. And we do have a generator now that I got from his stepdad, because his stepdad got like a huge generator. So we now have like a small generator, but we had to bring it to Ike's dad during the winter storm. We didn't actually get to use it because he's on an oxygen machine and he lost power and he would have died without it. So we might get a generator for him and a generator for ourselves. And and yeah, it's just like more and more, but like where we live in Houston, like we on our property, I also garden a lot, but like there's a very small area of our property that gets enough sun to actually grow food. So I can't really grow that much food. I would love to be growing like all my own food. But yeah, also we live through like so much petrochemical infrastructure that if there's like a really bad hurricane, there could be like a really bad chemical disaster situation. It's not a very climate resilient place where I live. I mean, Houston is going to be underwater. I don't know what the projections are, if it's like 15 or 20 years or 50 years, but like so we're at sea level. So this is not like a long-term sustainable place. It makes me feel like, but you know, my husband works for NASA, so we're very stuck here because like super loves working for NASA, but NASA will eventually have to leave. I figure like that's because if NASA's underwater, then it's even further south than us. So, you know, yeah, I don't know. It made me want to like move to a queer goat farm. I've always like dreamed of living on a queer goat farm with like a couple other queer families. And we're just, but then in that situation, then you're like terrified of your neighbors. And then like, where do you send your kid to school? You know, like moving outside of the city limits in the South is terrifying. And you're clearly dealing with that stage. Like you've made that devil's bargain. It's not good for queer people, like very visibly queer people, like either way.
Yeah. And I
or
like in my county, my job is for a nonprofit that works with LGBTQ plus youth. And we all live like in this like rural county. So it's like I just see like there are a lot of queer people in rural areas. And like that's what's her name? Samantha Allen, I think, has a really good book called Rural. I don't remember the name of it, but it's all about how like queer people very much exist in rural areas. But there's so much like hiding here. I need to read your book, Sim, honestly.
Oh,
same.
It's very short. It's only 75 pages. I think you'll like it though. If you liked Moon of the Crusted Snow, I think you'll like it. And I think Will, you might not like it because it's probably a little scarier. There's also ghosts in my book, so it's like,
fun. Then I might be bored.
Yeah.
Wait, Jurassic. Reed says, in general, I get a yearning to be more self-reliant and live off the land, but with student loan debt, it really doesn't seem realistic long term. Yeah, completely understandable.
Yeah, living the country life is such a pipe dream for many people under capitalism, right? Like you're stuck in the city because of your job or whatever.
Yeah, we're like our living here is such a fortunate thing, and we live in a barn, like, and we don't own this property, and we like it's just from like a really random connection that we live here, so it's like so unrealistic to be able to like live a off-grid, off the land, self-reliant thing under capitalism, especially.
Do you think the wisdom of like when catastrophe hits, it'll be safer to be further out than inside the city is actually true?
No idea.
You have like people's values and shit, you know? Like I don't know if I would rather. I don't know. So something I get annoyed with, and I think this book did a good job because this book shows like in a crisis, people in a community can come together. Way too often, something like a really big problem I had with Station 11 was like the power goes out and like within 24 hours, people are murdering each other. And like, it doesn't happen like that. Like in Houston, we have these disasters a lot, and people's first response is always like, come together. Like, let's help each other. You know, like I've got a kayak, I'm pulling people out of their houses. Like our city, you know, and it doesn't matter in those moments, like what your politics are, like most people are absolutely just there to help each other. And like after the winter storm, like there was all this like mutual aid drives and volunteering and stuff, you know, and that, but I think that it will only last like so long. And there is then at some point a breaking point where that changes. And we have never gotten there, thank God.
Right. Like what happens? Yeah.
But it is slower. I do think people's first instinct is like to come together and help each other. But then what happens when there's no food? I think it's food. And that's what it is in my book. It's like, what happens when the food runs out? Because I think that happened very quickly in the city in Moon of the Crusted Snow.
Yeah.
With the run on grocery stores. Yeah, I remember a Twitter thread one time, someone pointing out how unrealistic it is that in zombie novels, there's always like grocery stores full of stuff that they can go get. It's like, who restocked the store after the panic buying? Like, no, all of the grocery stores would be completely empty.
Yeah, true. Yeah, I agree with Angel's comment about like it being safer at first. Yeah. And then I do think that there will be like more resources available in cities and in towns, and definitely more of that community. Yeah, there was a lot of that, like both with the fires and the ice storm here. Other than like the militia, I do think it's like the people who are already living kind of out here in the country who are like, we already have this like kind of scarcity mindset almost. And so it's like those are the people who are less likely to be community oriented, which is why it's like a little bit scarier for me to live out here. And during the fires and the ice storm, we ended up, well, when we could leave, going to Cody's mom's house, who lives in the city. And that like did feel safer at first, but I agree, like what happens when the food runs out. And also like the priority is also higher in cities. So like with the ice storm, when like
reconnected faster and everything.
Yeah, like Cody's mom got power like 7 days before we did. So I think like in that sense, in maybe like a less long-term catastrophe, cities are a little bit safer. But like if it was like multiple years and I needed like all of this acreage to like grow things and like hunt and then that
and you'd be way better off.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I was thinking also of like, because this is obviously in a very cold climate, and so they're able to freeze food over the winter and such. But how do you feel like it would be different if this was a warmer climate?
Yeah, so I live in a warmer climate, and that's like the scary thing when power goes out in the summer is like it gets hot enough to kill you here. Like, like people for sure are dying of heat, overheating. And so that's one of the scary things about living here too. It's like a crisis if your AC goes out, like you have to get it fixed within a day or you have to leave your house. Like it's I mean, all summer long for like 6 months, it's like close to 100 degrees or over 100 degrees, and also with 100% humidity. So it's not like in the desert, your body like can't cool off, So it's just so freaking hot here. So yeah, it's not good. I mean, in some ways, like you've got a longer growing season, right? We're coastal, so like given societal collapse, I guess there'd be like more like fishing and estuaries and stuff. But it is a pretty brutal place to live in the South where it's hot.
So you feel like it was better, like it would be better to be in this extreme cold? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, not better, definitely different challenges. You can, in a cold, you can start a fire and you can, get inside a shelter and I guess put on more clothes, although they're going to have to start making their clothes, I suppose. But what's scary to me about heat, because I'm from the north where it's cold. So cold is less scary to me than like the killing heat, than like it's so hot and there's nothing you can do to cool off. And,
and if you're like running out of water, because that's another thing, like if it's snowing and you have a fire, and theoretically there are like enough trees that you can sustain the wood, you can just like take the ice or the snow and melt it, and you have clean enough water, or you can at least like boil it. So that's also less scary to me because when you just don't have water, or like when we had the wildfires, like the water was contaminated. Like we have well water here, so it was okay, but then we had to leave and it was like, okay, now I have to drink bottled water. Like what happens when this is gone?
Yeah, and the water here is super, super polluted. Houston is a super, super polluted place. Would not want to drink it. People do fish in the bayous and eat the fish out of the bayous, but I would have to be pretty darn desperate.
I saw a tweet the other day it was this author, Wendy Chu, she like does graphic novels. She like picked wild onions from a like city park and ate them. I was like, those have been so sprayed like that.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I don't know. That stressed me out. But yeah, we have a really contaminated river that runs through the valley here, and people are always fishing in it, and that's just not good for your body.
How was it where you live, Will?
I mean, I drink tap water. Everyone in Scandinavia drinks tap water. It's pretty good. Yeah, it's not contaminated at least, but there's definitely been like uproars and stuff from buildings in Denmark. They want to build like these to get more housing. They want to build like islands on the coast of Denmark to like build houses on top, but it's going to pollute the water a lot. And I think along the coastal line of Sweden, because it's a different country, they don't get any say in it, but the polluted water is going to affect them a lot too. So there's definitely like problems, when it comes to climate and polluted water and stuff. But the stuff we get in the tap is clean, at least.
Yeah. We drink our tap water filtered, except when we're under a boil water notice. Just because I couldn't living off the plastic bottles, like the amount of plastic consumption would really get to me. And actually, that's another situation where in the city, we have shittier air pollution, but we have better water. Like our water in the city is okay because Houston has like a pretty good water treatment facility. But the suburbs all have, the water's more dangerous, but they may have less air pollution. Depends on the suburb. But yeah, it's like everywhere you live in Houston is like trying to find a place to live. There's like super fun sites all over where there's like cancer clusters. There's like air pollution to think about. There's like water pollution to think about. It's like trying to find like the right place to live. And then can you afford it? Obviously, the places where the air and the water is clean and the schools are good and all that are for really rich people that do not include me. So
I had no idea it was such a problem there.
Well, Houston is like the petrochemical capital of the country. So we just have, I mean, at about 3 miles from my house is where the ship channel starts. And it's just miles and miles and miles, like 20 miles of nonstop chemical refineries. And this is highway. You can drive down 288 and it looks like Blade Runner or something. I mean, it's just all big steaming vats and pipes, for 20 miles from here to the coast. So, yeah, I live like right near that.
That's scary. I can see why climate change is always on your minds.
Yeah.
Oh, I think you froze for a second. Are you back?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. I don't know if you heard me or not, but I said that I can see why climate change is always on your mind.
Yeah, it feels very close here. Yeah, between like the chemical refineries like blowing up occasionally and then the floods and everything. It's like very on our doorstep all the time.
Yeah. Wow, scary.
Yeah. Should we talk about next month and the next month after that and the next month after that?
I think that's a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to tell us what? Sorry. Yeah. Go ahead.
Let me go get the book. Hold on.
Okay, so for the next 3 picks, there would be like a post on Instagram where you can read like a little bit more about the 3 books and check up if you want to join or not. And the next one will be on Sage's channel. They're going to get the book now and hopefully tell you about it.
Yeah, next book is Pearful of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler. This is really scary because the first sentence on the back is when global climate change and economic crisis lead to social chaos in the early 2020s. That's right now.
Will, you're gonna have a hard time with this book because this book is like 1,000 times scarier than this one. Honestly, like for like anyone watching, like a big trigger warning for violence in this. Like there's so much, it's so violent. But I think it's earned violence. I don't know. I've already read it. Sorry.
That's okay. Do you want to do another, like, I don't know anything other than what the back of the book says, if you want to pitch it.
I'll tell you this. I have the same edition and I really hate the cover.
Me too.
It has nothing to do with the book. Oh man, this book was so powerful though. Even though it's like so violent and scary, there's this like philosophy running through it. There's this like religion yours is much better.
Yeah, so much better.
That's way cooler.
I don't know if that has anything to do with the book.
Oh wait, it also sort of doesn't have anything to do with the book. Yeah.
I feel that's like remakes.
These are like stock photos of a Black woman. Like that's what they're doing. Because the main character is like actually in drag for most of the book. Like she would not be wearing this for like safety. So it's kind of like what's going on here. It's like about the collapse of society, but it's much more in the weeds about like how and why that's happening. And it's in Los Angeles. It starts in Los Angeles. So it's like in the urban center where like shit gets as bad as possible. But like I said, the religion or the philosophy running through it, Earthseed, is like so powerful and comforting to me in terms of like steeling yourself to deal with climate change. And yeah, it is dark and hard hitting, but it does feel realistic. Yeah. She pulls no punches. She's a very great writer.
Absolutely.
Because I've already read this and I actually have the sequel on my shelf. Do you think I mean, I'm going to like reread it or like reskim it, but do you think I should wait to read the sequel or should I try to read the sequel and then at the end of next week's live show, I could like tell you maybe a little bit about the sequel, like no spoilers or anything.
I mean, if you want to.
Yeah. Okay. I'll do that then. Cool.
Nice. I'm glad you get to read something that you haven't read yet.
So
should we announce the next 2 as well?
Yeah. So that's May. My pick is for June. It'll be a new release. So it's not going to be coming out until like mid-May. And that's The Impossible Resurrection of Grief by Olivia J. Kade. It's a novella, so it's super short. And it's, I think Olivia Kade is very, or Octavia Kade, sorry, it's Octavia Kade. We have 2 Octavias in a row. She's super scientific in her books. So I'm really curious about that. And it's about something about bringing back extinct thylacines and also dealing very directly with, climate grief. So, yeah. And Will, you want to announce your pick for July?
I picked Downdrift by Johanna Drucker. And this is like a bit of a weirder one. And I feel like climate change obviously is very serious, but I feel like this one will be like a little bit more silly incorporated. It reminds me of another climate fiction-ish book I read called Talking Animals, which like reimagines New York with animals who have their own climate problems, but it's comic because it's animals that talk. But in this one, there's like this 3.8 billion-year-old species that is telling the story of how other animals were kind of being developed and started inhabiting like human characteristics and stuff. And it says on the cover it's an eco-fiction. So hopefully it has a lot to do with climate change too.
Yeah, I feel like we haven't read one yet that's like super dealing with the science of climate change, right? Not really yet.
No.
More about like the sociology stuff. I'm hoping that the one that I picked and hopefully the one you picked too, will kind of get into more climate science incorporated into the fiction.
I started reading The Stone Ouida by Octavia Kate.
Oh, cool.
And I feel like it's almost kind of similar to Downdrift, where it's like from the perspective of all of these species that are going extinct and like how they're being impacted by climate change. It's also a very good short one that I haven't finished because it's on my e-reader and I forget about it all the time.
What was it called?
It's called The Stone Ouida, but
Ouida.
Ouida is like W-E with the bar, T-A with the bar.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to read that one too. So I'm glad.
I also saw you, Sim, you posted about the
multi-species cities.
Yeah, I feel like that would be cool to read about too. Like something a bit more.
It is cool. I was thinking for my next pick, since I already announced the Resurrection of Grief, but yeah, I think it'd be cool to do one of these solar punk anthologies. I don't know when Imagine 2200 is coming out. So there's a Grist one coming out that's like, they just did a call for it and I submitted. But it's a huge contest, so I probably won't get it. But I'm sure it's going to be a really great anthology. And that would be, I'm hopeful it comes out like within a year, and then it could be one of my picks. Or because the reading short stories is cool because you get lots of different people's perspectives on climate solution. So Imagine 2200 is going to be all about looking back 200 years from now on this moment, and like imagining a world where climate change was solved, and sort of through fiction trying to communicate like what were some of those solutions, or like what does the world look like after we've come out the other side on this.
Wow. Yeah. Cool. I also have my next pick picked out, but I'll keep it a secret.
Awesome.
Cool.
Well, thank you for everyone who joined and for Sim and Sage.
Yeah, thanks for hosting us. Yeah.
I had a really fun chatting with you about this book and all your thoughts and experiences that I clearly haven't had. It was very enlightening. I really enjoyed it.
Me too.
Yay, me too. Thanks for joining, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye-bye.